All right. Welcome back to another episode of the 50 Fierce and Fit podcast. My name is Monica Crawford. I am here today with Laura of 50 Mental Health. And without further ado, I want you to go ahead and introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do, your background, whatever you feel is important.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So yeah, first of all, 5050, obviously this was meant to be. Um, so at 50 Mental Health, the main kind of mission is to do one things like this, which is connect people to different resources that are, culturally competent and make sense in our field. Um, Also, we provide different trainings. Tailored to different apartments, whatever you may need. My main mission is to implement mandatory wellness checks within departments. Um, the police culture, as you know, is super reactive and not proactive. So we kind of like to wait until, you know, something's real bad and then we tell someone go to peer support, and half the time peer support people don't want to talk to peer support, or that's really when like shit has hit the fan. So the goal is, if we implement these wellness checks and kind of have it be completed by a culturally competent clinician who's just outside of your department, but hey, once, twice a year, whatever your department wants, I know I'm going to sit down and meet with Laura and I'm going to talk about these things and I'm going to unload, and it's just going to be normalized. And, ideally, ideally it's like part of in service, right? Like, you have to do yearly in service. Well, this is part of it. And so from command staff down, everyone would be required to go, in my mind. And I know there's union barriers to that, but that's something to work on. And then the department just gets back a list of participants. There's nothing else. There's HIPAA involved. There's no one else is getting any other information. So we find that I think decreases a lot of the stuff that you see along the way, such as, officer suicides. If you think about it, people are maybe upset or catching stuff at work, or they're having a rough time in their home life, and there's just no really like safe emotional place that they can reside. And so we're seeing, over the years, like I know several people, I'm sure you do as well, who have, killed themselves. Unfortunately, my lieutenant killed himself. He hanged himself a couple of years ago, and he was had 22 years in. Um, and it's just, a lot of these things are avoidable. A lot of the problems first responders have in terms of PTSD, depression, anxiety, all of that can be mitigated by having having your department support you and have things in place where you're allowed to unload these things along the way, and not just when something is deemed to be critical. Because the other problem with that is, what's critical to me may not be critical to you, right? Maybe you've been to a million, hangings or whatever, and it no longer bothers you and it's fine. And for whatever reason, I go that day and it hits me wrong. And, or I have something going on in my personal life, and you know, something just happened and I go to a scene that's supposed to be normal, but I totally internally I'm losing it. Like, I should have a place where it's safe for me to know that I have someone to contact. And right now there's, in most departments in Massachusetts anyways, we don't have that.
That's awesome. I like that a lot. So you brought up peer support. How is what you do different or similar to peer support?
Well, I guess yeah, that's a good question. I guess similar, because in a way I am, I guess, a peer. I have, I got on in 2012. Unfortunately, I got medically retired after some shoulder surgery, some incidents at work. Um, and so I got medically retired, and prior to getting on, I had my master's in social work, and I have obtained my independent licensure. So I'm a peer in the respect that, you're not gonna have to sit down and explain the job to me, because I understand the job. I've still been in the cruiser over a decade, so um, I have that aspect where, it's not gonna feel weird to talk about things with me. But I have, on the mental health side, that's also my background. So it would be a private conversation, and ideally I would have more insight than you know, just someone you're friends with, since I, have trained in that extensively. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes me wonder. I've never gone through the peer support route because my experience with what was our peer support team was like a gossip circle.
Yeah, same.
Which
That's why people don't want to go.
yeah, I'm sure that's a concern most everywhere. Because I actually had that happen to me. I voiced to like one person in peer support, like I think I knew somebody who had committed suicide, and it wasn't an officer, it was just like a civilian, and it happened in our city. And I was like, that's crazy. Like I knew it was like a female who had taught in our academy. It was like her husband or something like that. And I
Yeah.
just mentioned it in conversation. I wasn't like personally affected by it. But then that night, like someone else on peer support was like, I'm so sorry that like da 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 like went into detail. And first off, I was like, how does he even know about this? Like I mentioned it to one person. And second of all, like this
Yeah.
was not even like a big deal. Like it was literally just a conversation with somebody of, oh wow, like I kind of know those people, like third party
Yeah.
experience. But
Yeah.
um I don't know, peer support always freaked me out. But I guess another good question is, I mean, have you had experience with those peer support counselors, or do they have, is it just like a regular counselor, or do they have like any sort of tie to law enforcement or first responders at all?
Yeah. So peer support are typically officers. Um, that's, I mean, from I don't, and this may range from states or departments or whatever, but they're
Oh,
officers that have like different training that are still peers, but they're not mental health experts.
okay. I
And
guess
then
I'm
the other
thinking,
thing is, the other thing is,
oh, you're good.
the option would be basically like EAP, which, do you guys have EAP? Yeah. Which
Yeah.
here, like EAP means expose and punish, essentially. Like that's another one people don't want to use because you don't know the guy that you're being told to call. Like he probably doesn't understand anything having to do with law enforcement, and essentially EAP is hired and working for your city or town. So I don't know. There's just barriers, in using those things. And I'm sure they work great for some people, and some people probably had really good success. It's not like a black and white thing, but I think at the end of the day, having a department that is going to support your mental health and your wellness um, would be amazing. I don't know what that's like, but I feel like it would be amazing.
Yeah. So I think I'm getting confused because I here we have first responder support services, which sounds kind of like what you have set up, but I think it's a counselor that they actually go to. I know it's a similar thing where they just like give the agency like a bill. I don't know if it has the names on it or whatever, but um, even still, I've always been leery about going to somebody that's like tied to your department one way, shape, or form because it's
Yeah.
like you worry about getting ostracized for it.
Hmm.
So so your organization, 50 Mental Health, is that something that like a department head will contact you and bring you in to set up the structure?
Yeah. Yep. I basically I would go in and talk to them and tell them how it works. And kind of go through exactly what I would go through with, whoever's on the job that's coming in to meet. And basically, it's a checklist of different things. It's sitting down, having a conversation, kind of like evaluating where you are right now today, and then providing you with a bunch of different resources. So maybe you don't need it today, you don't need it tomorrow. Maybe like 2 years from now, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in a shitty place, and I remember I have all these resources, or I remember I can ask Laura, how do I get into that place? Like maybe I want to go somewhere for a week. Maybe I need to go to Warrior Path or Boulder Crest, or maybe I just need like outpatient help, or maybe I'm starting to feel like I'm drinking a bunch and I just might need to like talk about that some more. It's like having the information, right? Is half the battle. So I think that's part of it too, is like going through the stuff, having the conversation. I'm pretty blunt, and validating in an appropriate way, but also, like just to say like, hey man, like it sounds like you're like it's really shitty right now, and maybe, you might want to take a look at these things. I don't know. Usually people know, like, like we have the answers like within us. And sometimes like it's like we need someone, a little outside perspective to kind of say, like, okay, I don't even know you and you're telling me A, B, and C. Like maybe you do want some extra support right now. Or if you don't right now, that's totally fine. But here's a list of places and people and names that like if you do down the road, you have this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I mean, I've been a huge advocate for mental health, and that was even before I got into law enforcement because I also started, I have a background in mental health. I worked as like a case manager for a mental
Oh,
health
cool.
facility for my first year out of college, just with a master's in criminal justice instead of social work. So pretty similar.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess, what would be your advice for somebody who wants to reach out to someone like you, but maybe on the fence?
I I look at it as like two things. Like one, like what do you really have to lose? Reaching out and having a conversation is not gonna determine if you're fit for duty or not. Like that's not gonna happen. And really you don't have to give if you just reach out, you don't have to give anything about yourself. You don't have to say your name. You don't have to say your department. Like your department doesn't have to know. Like that's fine. Um and also I would challenge someone even if in what you're doing, like, okay, well, maybe you're not ready now, and maybe that's something versus like we you learned in grad school, right? Like you're supposed to meet someone where they are and whatever. But I don't know, I think people need to be challenged a little bit. And I would say kind of like, okay, well, what day is a good day for change? When's the easiest day for change? Is it Monday? Is it Tuesday? Like no good day is the easiest day for change. Like you just can make the decision one day and you just fucking do it, and then you put in the effort and you see. And if you reach out to somebody and I say you have a couple sessions with them, maybe 3, maybe 4, whatever, and you're just not like feeling it, then you find someone else. It's like dating, but therapy, like not everybody is going to be everybody's match. It took me a long time to find someone I really like. Um, but now, I mean, that I would never switch people because she's so good. And I think that another thing that's important is if you do reach out, tell them what your expectations are. Tell them what you want. I told my lady right off the bat, I said, listen, I want your advice. I want you to challenge me. I want you to tell me that I am wrong. And I said, it's not helpful for me for you to just sit there and be like, oh, it sounds like you're sad. Oh, yeah, that must be hard. Like, that doesn't work. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't give that to someone else. So if that's what they needed, they also shouldn't come to me. But I mean, I had therapy last week and she said to me, I started laughing because she goes, well, you fucked that up. And I was dying because she was 100% right. But I was like, all right, yeah, thank you. But I mean, I've been with her now for a year and a half. So they probably shouldn't tell you that the first couple times. But like, it's a relationship, right? So like if I need something from her, I need to tell her what I need. That's my responsibility as the client. If my expectation is that she's just going to do all these things, I'm telling you right now, they don't tell you to do that in grad school. They tell you to like validate and active listening and all this stuff, and that's great. But we are a weird population that needs more, or typically, and not everyone, but I think a lot of people want more like straightforwardness. They want advice. They want, all these things. So making sure that they can give you what you need is also important because you don't want to feel like you're wasting your time. And you can ask them if they have first responder training. What do they know about first responders? How do they feel? I mean, also, like my lady's not a first responder, but she was in the army forever. So like she gets the vein of what we do. So finding somebody that's culturally competent, I think, is also important.
Yeah, I love all those points that you brought up. I've been to I think I've only ever had 2 different counselors because before I moved to Tulsa, I was in the Ohio area, so I saw somebody up there, but that's why I chuckle because it's like the open-ended, like, reflective statements that you're like, "You sound sad." I was like, I kinda had somebody like that.
Like,
It was
thanks. That's why I'm
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
No
I mean,
secret.
she would kinda guide me to different conclusions, I guess, or whatever. Like, it still was beneficial, but at the same time, she used to apologize for having, like, a reaction of something that I would say, especially if it was, like, something she disagreed with, and then she'd be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to do that." I was like, "No, please, like, give me something."
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
exactly. You have to It's like if you don't tell someone what your expectation is, don't expect them to guess. We've all done that in relationships and therapy, and it doesn't work in either of those places. So just be
yeah.
straightforward, I would say. But I don't think that people have anything to lose. Like if you're feeling like shit or you just have things piling up, like it's gonna come out sideways at your family reunion this summer when you're camping, when you have like 6 too many Bud Lights. Like that's what's gonna happen. So just deal with it as it unfolds, don't let it pile up. And I say that as a person who like did that. I did do that, and it has not been enjoyable. And there's way more to unpack when you don't do it as you should.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have a couple people who come to mind, and like I mentioned before we started recording, I've had a handful of women come to me lately with like similar experiences of like whether it's like toxic work environment or sexual harassment or just like being on eggshells at work all the time. Like, do you have maybe like three tips that come to mind of somebody who's in an environment like that to help like be proactive with mental health?
So, I mean, and like these questions, of course, make you think of your own. Not, of course, I'm 1000% not naming names, but like people that you've encountered that maybe have
Mhm.
been in charge of you at some point in your life, in policing, not in policing. We all encounter people like this that, I mean, sexual harassment is, I mean, that's a grievance all day long. I wouldn't fuck with that. Like, you deserve to be able to go to work and feel safe and feel comfortable and not deal with that bullshit. There's no way. That's 1000%. I would take care of that the way that you need to take care of it. And if it's your sergeant, then go to your lieutenant. Like, I wouldn't even mess around with that. If it's, other things that you don't like. I once had a sergeant that was really just kind of erratic behavior, I would say, and like really like I never knew what to expect from them. One day I felt like we were cool. The next day it was like, and then it just kind of like spiraled into like watching this person kind of climb the ladder into lieutenant, and like their behavior never changed. And eventually, honestly, I just confronted them. I asked to have a meeting, and I said, respectfully, I'm really confused about what, if anything, I'm doing wrong. I'm happy to have constructive criticism. I want to be the best officer that I can be. I said, but it's really confusing when you're not explaining that to me and you're just treating me a certain type of way. I was really clear and really just I don't know, like kind of like setting the expectation, I guess, like kind of we talked about earlier, like what is it that you want me to be doing? This is what I'm receiving from you. I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with that. Because right now it just feels like you don't like me. It feels personal, and I don't know if I'm receiving that wrong. If I'm doing something wrong at my job, please tell me what that is. And if someone doesn't like you as a person, like that's on them. That's not on you. But they actually said to me, like, yeah, communication is something I'm working on, and da da da, whatever, whatever. Like, it was weird. It kind of, I mean, I don't know. And I think even that, like, you toe the line of like, is this gonna backfire? But I just didn't care. I think at some point you just decide like you don't care, and I think it depending on what the situation is, if it's sexual harassment, or if it's like things where you don't feel safe at work, like I would definitely take the first approach that I said. If it's other things that are just like bothering you, whether it's just your coworker or command staff or whatever, I've found for me, I like to just directly address it because I don't like feeling weird about things. I don't like things like, I mean, these are the people you work with that like are supposed to be able to like save your life if you need to. You don't have to be good friends, but like you could clear the air. And sometimes it's a matter of just deciding like I'm going to be the bigger person and this is going to suck, but I'm going to do it anyways because at the end of the day, like you kind of take your power back by saying something.
Yes, I like that. And I hope for most, did that, like, how did that resolve? Like, did you get any resolution from doing that?
Yeah, I mean, shortly after that, I have got medically retired, but I mean that not secondary to that, but like yeah, it was. He kind of like laid off me. He heard me, and whether or not he made excuses or agreed with me or not, it was like I got to say what I needed to say, and I felt
Mhm.
some type of like peace with that I wasn't like hanging on to that. Because like that's the thing, right? Like if other people want to put their shit onto you, but like you make the choice to continue to carry it or not, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that because I mean, I'm glad that that was at least a decent resolution for you.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, in my experience, I think well, at least the one time I can think I tried to do that, it didn't go very well. But it happens, I guess.
What do you
Communication
think?
is hard.
What do you think if you could have done differently, if
So
anything?
yeah, the sergeant I'm thinking of, it was one of those things. It was my rookie year. Granted, I had experience going into that agency, so it was just my rookie year at that agency. Um,
Mhm.
but I had had a conversation with him asking him what his expectations were of me. Because I'm like you said, like I'm a very coachable person. Like
Because
I want
that's how it
constructive.
should be.
Yeah, because I want like the constructive feedback. I'm not gonna fight you on something. If you're like, hey, I would like to see you do more of X, I'm gonna be like, okay, great, just tell me.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna fight you on it. Um, so we left that conversation very vague, because I was like, what are your expectations? What do you want to see? It was one of those things where I kind of like you. I love that you do the crisis negotiation stuff because like I literally it sucked. I got into it for like 2 months before I left the department, so kind of not really got in there. But at the time, I was like, I want to do crisis negotiations. Those are very well integrated with SWAT teams because y'all get called out to do the same job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, he was a SWAT guy, and at the time, kind of talked down his nose at me when I mentioned anything regarding SOT. Um, I don't know if that was because he had 20 years on, and it was one of more of an old school thinking guy. He was kind of slightly socially awkward too, so it was one of those people you were like, "Are you being an asshole, or are you just being incredibly awkward right now?" So you couldn't really tell.
Yeah.
Um, but he didn't give me any expectations, and then a couple months later, we got into the middle of working COVID, and they're like, "Don't stop a car. Basically, only respond to anything that's in progress." And then it was, why aren't you stopping cars? Well, nobody ever told me I needed to go out and stop cars. So don't expect me to do something you never told me to do because I'm just supposed to inherently know what you want me to do.
Yeah.
So literally the next day, he's like, we want more like stopping cars and like warrant arrests. Like they want more like city warrant arrests, which of course at the time I was like, I don't know. I'm not a city cop, I guess. I couldn't wrap my brain around taking somebody to jail over like driving under suspension, but that's what they wanted. Um, so sure enough, expired tag, warrant, boom, done, hooked, go to the jail. I get a text from him, hey, good job. Thanks. We're shooting at fish in a barrel here. Like,
Yeah.
like I nothing against people who go out and find good stops and stuff, but I'm like, it's not incredibly hard to arrest to do it to effect a warrant arrest in my mind.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things. I guess the whole shift was laughing. They're like, "What is she? She's a slug. She doesn't stop cars." Da, 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 da. Well, no, I don't. I don't go out and look and stop for cars because that's not my niche. That's not the thing that like I will do it if you ask me to do it. But that was not something I like. I enjoyed doing necessarily. Like I enjoyed working with domestic violence calls and the protective orders and the stuff that required like, here's resources to go help yourself. Like I'm gonna do my best I can to help you, but that's
Yeah.
what I enjoyed with my impact of like working with crime victims and like trying to like stuff like that was what I enjoyed doing, which was take your calls and work your calls well, which is what I prided myself in. And then they were like, well, you're supposed to know as a rookie, you're supposed to be stopping cars. Well, okay, don't make me guess. So
Right.
it was one of those deals. But I like that you had at least somebody that was responsive to what you said. And hopefully that's what you're looking for too.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say he was responsive, but like in all honesty, at that point I didn't really care because I do think he like lessened up like a little bit, but also it wasn't I think that was the response, right? He kind of gave me a little bit of a non-response, like a kind of yeah, whatever. But like it was kind of a BS answer, but also like I was like, okay, whatever. I think honestly for me, it felt really good saying that and not just letting him continue to behave in a way that like you expect like a 12-year-old to behave and call it out. But like in a way where it's like, hey, I'm happy to hear whatever it is that you have to tell me. I know you have a lot of wisdom, but and like I want to learn from that. But when you're just yelling at me or like calling me off calls, do like running around all like crazy, doing all this random shit, like I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing here. So it's the same thing. It's like that. What is the expectation? So like, if you don't know what the expectation is, tell someone that. Like, ask them to be clear with you. I first asked like my sergeant, and he literally said he was like, I don't know what his problem is with you, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm glad, like, my whole shift was like, "What'd you do?" I'm like, "I have no idea. I don't know. I was born a girl, I guess. That's the problem. I don't know." But
Yeah.
he
That's
decided
what create
he decided he had a thing for me, and he wasn't into it, so, you know.
well, that too, I think when you don't have expectations, it creates a lot of anxiety. At least it did. It did for me. I mean, it's affected my husband in a similar way too, of like when you're constantly worried about doing the wrong thing because you don't know what the right thing is because it changes all the time. You're like,
Yeah.
it
It's
creates
like
anxiety over time.
it's an uphill battle, right? Like, let's just be clear about whatever it is that you want. I'm gonna do my best within reason, and, like, that's it.
Yeah.
But I would tell him to try to be direct. Don't just put up with that shit and roll over about it. And if someone gets upset with you about it, like, that may happen. You may not have the best outcome, but at the end of the day, for me, it felt really freeing to, like, be able to say what I wanted to say. And I think I said it pretty well, it was still respectful. I was like, I'm down for constructive criticism, but I don't know what this is. I don't know what your expectation is for me. Can you show me where I could be doing better?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that approach a lot. That's awesome. That's cool. I love that you brought that up because I think especially women, like I know, like you mentioned, like trying to report sexual harassment. It was for me, it was the same thing. Like I was female rookie, it was another sergeant that was a male. And I was like, I'm gonna like laugh this off and brush over. It was a text message. He kind of like towed the line with it, but it was basically inappropriate advances of like hitting on me and things like that. But it's tough, and I've got another female that I'm coaching right now that's kind of in the same situation where she's got less than 2 years on, and it's another male sergeant that's being inappropriate with her, and it's so tough to wanna try to report that and knowing that, like, it's gonna be another, like, target on your back essentially because 'cause you're causing ruffles in the system that's been allowed for so long, and you're the first person to, like, speak up and go against the grain, so to speak, even though when you have, like, every right to do so.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because when you get on to, like, I mean, I really don't like being like pulling like the cut, like, oh, we're oppressed and there's less of us, like, whatever. But really, like, it is like that,
Yeah.
like, it is like that. I mean, no matter what department you go, there's way less women. I don't care if you're in the city or if you're in the country, it's probably even worse. But I mean, it sucks because on top of already people probably having, like, misconceptions around your strength or your willingness to engage in a fight or your whatever it is, it's like on top of that, like, if you have any type of problem and bring it up, it's like you're the fucking problem. But really, like, no, it's like you're the problem for doing this and no one's called you out on this behavior. And I mean, I don't know because I haven't been in that specific situation. But I remember when I first got on in 2012, Laura, like, and he liked me at this point. He hadn't turned into being a dick yet. He was like, no, since you're female, no matter what, just remember, like, if there's a fight, at least, like, jump on a leg. And I'm like, do you remember, like, I just went to the same 6-month academy as everyone else and have the same, you know, um, training? Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy. This is not going to be my first fight. It won't be my last fight. Like, that's fine. But, like, so you're already at, like, kind of, you feel internally at a disadvantage, and you're like, fuck, I don't want to have to say anything about this, like, but also, this really sucks that I have to go to work and, like, see this person, and this is awkward. Like, has she tried to, like, directly say anything to him, like, cut the shit, or, like, has she tried any of that, or is she just not? No. I mean, I would say that
Right.
first. I'd be like, cut the shit. Like, what you're doing is not appropriate, because part of it is, for me, and I know this is giving people way too much benefit of the doubt, but in general in life, I think if people are, maybe sexual harassment shouldn't be included in the statement. But if people are behaving in, like, a way that, like, I don't like, um, in my personal life, that I have to deal with all the time. I'm not talking about, like, people on calls, because really that's just typical, right?
Everybody.
But
Yeah.
if you have, like, your husband's doing something, and or your sisters or whoever, somebody in your life is doing something, and you're not particularly a fan of it, and maybe it's the way that they're expressing their opinion about something, or maybe it's whatever it is, I always say, like, have you tried talking to the person? Because until we tell someone what our expectation is, hey, you're doing this all the time, and like, or you're saying this, and this makes me super uncomfortable, or I don't like how this is coming out. I'd appreciate it. Like you need to cut the shit. You don't have to be nice about it, but if it's your husband, you might want to be. But like, hey, you keep doing this, and whatever. Give people the opportunity to change is the point. Once you tell them, then you're giving them the opportunity to do something different, and then what they do with that is how I take my next steps. Like, if they've heard me, they've received it, I've told them, and they don't change, well, now you fucked up and I told you, and now this is going up a level. You want to give people the benefit of the doubt that, like, maybe they're just dumb, or maybe they're just like in that moment, like, whatever it was. I mean, give someone the opportunity to change. I know for me, it's been important in relationships, give people, even myself, I've maybe said and done stuff where I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I didn't realize that came off that way. That's something I want to work on.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. That's great advice for really, like, not even just women in law enforcement, but anybody that's like newer, doesn't want to make waves. Like, it's tough to communicate with other superiors too, of like trying to bring something to their attention because you're like half terrified they're going to take it the wrong way, which I
Yeah.
guess that's on them if you're trying to be as respectful as possible, because I had that too. I mean, I think our personalities are similar in the fact we like to challenge people. I've done that before where I've asked the sergeant a question, and I think, again, the way I guess his level of insecurity with himself, I assume, the question came off as a challenge to him when really it
Yeah.
was more of me trying to understand something. Um, and then he just got petty with it after that. But it's tough to work on that. But I love that advice. So with what you do you work one on one with people, or is it mainly just with departments and organizations?
Yeah. So the like wellness checks are individual, right? So those would just be us sitting down having a conversation, and then um the trainings and stuff I've done with my partner, Artie, who he's in the street outreach unit currently in Boston, and him and I do some trainings together.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, if anybody, would you just work with people in Massachusetts, or would you be able to like consult, like kind of like over Zoom, or how would you, or do you do that?
Yeah, so I'm debating that. That's a thought bubble for now, but
I gotcha.
yeah, maybe.
Okay.
But I'm happy currently now to um I've had a lot of people reach out from maybe for themselves or for someone they know, and just say, hey, can you guys provide? And so I'll either do it on my own, look it up and send them a message, or if I don't know, say there's someone from your area, I may say, hey, are you comfortable with me putting this out to the group to gather more resources, obviously anonymously. And people have been really receptive and helpful to that. I know there's been several times over the past few months that's happened. And it's
Cool.
cool to watch people come together too, because it's like everything we read and everything we say, about all the stigma, but it's like, people really do want to help each other out, and people really do want things to change and want like the best for each other. So not that I want people to be like reaching out or struggling, but it's nice to see when people are brave enough to do that, how many people kind of rally around that person.
Yes, absolutely. I've seen that happen a couple times within my Facebook group. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, last thing, if you could give like any one tip that comes to mind for anybody dealing, maybe being proactive or just how to, I guess, help maintain mental health while working in law enforcement, what would it be?
I'd say like take care of yourself. And for me and you, I think both, that's physically and mentally, right? There's many different pillars to wellness, right? There's like mental health, physical, spiritual, professional, whatever, there's a whole host. We could keep going. But um, you know, policing and law enforcement and corrections and fire and dispatch and everything. It's so stressful, it's chaotic, it's like it's unpredictable. So like do the things that you can control. Empower yourself in the ways that you can, and don't wait until it feels like it's too late, you know? It doesn't have to be like, oh my God, I was just involved in a shooting and now, like it doesn't have to get to that level. I think we just like wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and like things aren't that bad. And then like your partner or your kid or somebody says something weird to you and it's just like the the thing I put up today, it's like then like you just freak out, because it turns out there were so many other things inside there. So I think, yeah, taking care of your physical health for sure directly affects your mental health, and that's a lot of the stuff that you're helping people with. And and then also just being brave enough to be like, you know what, maybe things aren't horrible. Maybe I don't need to like go impatient somewhere, but also like maybe I could be a little bit lighter. Maybe I could be a little bit happier. Maybe I could be a little less, hyper vigilant, or things would be easier at home if I kind of just dealt with this stuff. And sometimes you don't even really know until you start doing it. That you're like, wow, I didn't even. It's like you ever go get a massage and they're like, oh, what area's hurt? And you're like, oh, like my left shoulder blade. And then all of a sudden they're on like your low back and you're like, holy shit, I didn't even know I had a problem down there. That's like kind of how therapy is, right? Like you're going for like, oh yeah, like my sergeant sucks or whatever, and you're talking about it, and then all of a sudden you're like talking about a death you went to like 5 years ago, and then you're like, oh, also like my partner pissed me off at home, and like before you know it, like there's so many things that you're kind of like unraveling to become, I think, more so like your favorite version of yourself, and people around you start to feel it, but mostly I think internally you feel it. So I think just be brave enough to like take those steps, um, for yourself. It'll help you in the long run.
Absolutely. I love that. Where is the best place to find you if somebody wants to reach out to you, find some resources, or just maybe chat with you about something they've got going on?
Yeah, I'd say the Instagram for sure. People send a lot of messages on there. And if you want, you could go to the website, 50mentalhealth.com, and it's the 5-0. And then the email is just my name. So Laura at 505-0mentalhealth.com is going to be the email. So any of those three places.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
Or they
thank
can
you
tell
so
you
much.
and you can tell me, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I always forward people to you if I need to. Cool.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate it. I hope whoever's listening to this has some takeaways that they can use and hopefully
Yeah.
improve their mental health and their career.
Perfect. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right.